Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Art of Creation show, where we look at how choice creates and different possibilities for creating a life and a living that can actually work for you. So I am your host, Rebecca Boswell, and today we are joined by the amazing, beautiful, intelligent, world-traveling phenomenon, Katherine McIntosh. And our topic today is actualizing to create. So I know there's a fun discussion right now about, what is creation and how can we actually take all those energies and then, right, we get sometimes caught up with the whole doing piece. So it's like, how can we bring the being, the choice, the creation, all that fun, playful energy, and then actualize that into a form in this physical reality with our bodies, that can actually create more of what we'd like to see showing up in our everyday lives and with the people around us. So, Katherine, thank you so much for being here today.
Yes, I'm so excited. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to see what we create.
Yes, I'm so, and you have been, the globe is your playground. So, it's really great to be able to get you. You're home in Colorado now, though, right? For a momentary stop off, get new underwear.
Yeah, right. Well, I've been home for actually I've been home the most in the last 6 months, and I've been home in the last 6 years. So it's been really nice to like reset, recalibrate, all that
Cool.
stuff. So
Cool. And you're a mom, so, international speaker, author, coach, mom, maybe it'd be easier to list the things that you haven't played with. I know you used to be heavily involved in the NIA community. That's something that I used to play with too. So I remember when we met hearing about that, and that was a fun connection in our journeys. So Carla is not stalking you. It's official. She put it on Facebook. Carla, we're so happy to have you here today. Stalk away. Glad to have you. So Katherine, actualizing to create. So when we started looking at, okay, what would it be fun to play with together, and what's up in your world, and that popped. So just to begin this conversation in this 10 seconds, when we even just say that, actualizing to create, where do you go with that, and what comes up for you?
well, it's such a great, yeah, because it doesn't really make sense when you look at the words and the connection of it. And I'm kind of a junkie in the way that I create is to totally say something that doesn't make any sense, but it has an energy of a different possibility. So for me, what sparked this, and you inviting me on here, I had been listening a lot to Gary Douglas, the founder of Access, and he was talking about how when you create something, that's a choice. So the minute you make a choice, that's creation.
Yeah.
And so most of us are walking around going, what would it take to create $10,000? Or what would it take to create a traveling business? Or what would it take to be a mom and travel? Or what? And that's already the energy of creation. And so what happens is people go and ask that same question 100 times. So they're just planting the same seed 100 times, waiting for the seed to grow without nurturing the seed so it can actualize.
Yeah. Okay.
It's like, so let's say you're driving down, it's summertime, and at least summer in the US, and you're driving down the road and you see a really hot convertible, and you're like, oh, that would be like, yesterday I saw this beautiful like Porsche convertible, and then I saw for a white Ferrari one after it, and I was like, yeah, that is creation.
Yeah.
Already you're letting the universe know that turns my body on, that turns my life on, that turns me on. And where we get caught is we judge ourselves that we can't afford it or it won't show up, and then that stops the actualization of it.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is that you're actually in that moment where you're acknowledging the energy of that thing, whatever it is, whether it's a Ferrari or something else, and you're really tapping into it and you're experiencing it in that moment, and you're like, yes, And then there's this disconnect between being it, experiencing it, knowing it's possible, and then actually creating it or actualizing it into material form in our lives. So when we have the law of attraction conversation, it's like saying, I'd like to have a red car. I'd like to have a red car. And then the idea that poof, it will just show up. But we know from that conversation that if you just sit in your house with the windows drawn and the shades closed, just saying, I'm going to have a Ferrari, I'm going to have a Ferrari, I'm going to have a Ferrari, the universe may not, actually the universe may deliver a Ferrari right outside your door, but if you don't actually go out, you won't even know it's there. So you're saying that there are pieces where you then can take that energy of creation, and there's another piece to having it show up in a way that's recognizable in your life.
Yeah, and it's the the analogy of when you plant, like if I were to plant 100 of the same seed,
Yeah.
thinking that I was asking 100 different questions or asking for 100 different flowers, and I planted the same seed in winter under snow and didn't water it and didn't say hi to it and went in my house and drew the shades and then expected in spring to come out and have 100 different flowers, I would be doing myself a disservice. I'd be doing the flowers a disservice. I'd be doing the earth a disservice.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's the recognizing that the minute you see something that you want, or you ask a question, which is what would it take to create blank? Most of us are stuck in constantly asking that same question over and over again, instead of the minute you ask the question, you put it into existence as a possibility.
Yeah.
And then the play is, okay, so how do we take that possibility and start to play with it so it comes closer, so it can come to fruition, so it shows up in ways that it surprises you. And what I've noticed in my own life, and what I notice when I work with people from all over the world, it's like we forget that it's already happening. It's just not on our timeline.
Yeah.
It's just not when we want it to show up. So then we go into judgment, we go into self-doubt, we go into criticism, and that slows the actualization of it. It slows it coming into physical form in the here and now.
Yeah. Not to mention the energy of that could show up in a different physical form. You're like, wait a minute, it's not a Ferrari. And yet when we are actually open to receiving what that energy of the creation is, it could show up as a new dress or a travel somewhere, or a new person in our lives or whatever. It doesn't always have to show up in the way that we think it's going to. So when you said, we go into judgment, right? How much do we judge sometimes that what we're asking for isn't showing up, and yet what we're asking for is actually right in front of us, and we're not receiving it because we're so busy judging that what we asked for in its, like this exact thing isn't showing up the way I wanted to control it to show up as.
And like that right there is the brilliance of it. And the brilliance of where we miss out on the magic is when you've literally missed the energy of it and it's right in front of your face because you're expecting the white Ferrari or, the tall, dark, and handsome or whatever it is. And those are the unkindnesses when it's like, oh my gosh, if I were to go, oh, everything I've ever asked for is right in front of me. Yeah. It just does not look like what I think.
Yeah. And would I be willing to receive it and acknowledge it? Yeah. I mean, how cool is that? Just for like a second, if we could just all tap in right now to all the things that are actually right here in front of us, maybe one action away, maybe one, just one choice away. And, it's those judgments that tell us, well, we can't, or we shouldn't, or, everyone but us, whatever we play with ourselves, we all have our own flavor. So you're founder of the No Judgment Diet. And so, I know from your bio, you share openly that for a long time it was a struggle for you, sort of having a body without judging it, right? Having like the right body or whatever it was that you were experiencing. There was a bit of a struggle there, and there were a lot of things that you did and you tried with this idea that there was something to fix and that the body was the problem. And then you discovered this big secret that actually all of those struggles, all of those things actually had nothing to do with your body. And from there, all these different doorways opened up, and you began to access your genius and the magic around you in so many more ways than you ever thought possible. That's, I believe, really where all of your coaching stems from. So when you are playing with people and having this conversation through that program, through the No Judgment program, where do you start with people? I mean, have you ever met someone that is not in judgment of themselves? Is that
you?
even like the mythical unibeast? Like, is it, what do you know about that?
Maybe
What is
Gary.
possible?
Maybe Gary. Gary would be like the one person on the planet. He doesn't judge himself that much. So, it is interesting. I love that question. Where do I start?
Yeah.
I start where they are.
Yeah.
Like I start with what's the story or what's the information or what's the question that where are they? And what can they hear to start it? But what is and how this ties into creation and actualization is that we think that we can create or actualize something absent of how we feel about ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's actually how we feel about ourselves that determines what we're capable of actualizing. Because every single one of us and everyone that's watching creates probably a million things a day.
Yeah. At least.
Oh, I'd like that color, or I'd like that outfit, or I want that car, I want to travel more, I'd like to be in the sun more, I'd like to have more ease, or I'd like a house cleaner. Those are all creations.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, so how with the body, it really is that the body is the one that requires the actualization. If you didn't have a body, you wouldn't need to actualize anything.
Right.
So for me, it's about getting people to recognize that however old you are and however long you've embodied with this body, the body's never left your side. It's put up with probably more abuse than you'd ever put up with in a relationship. Right? It still desires to contribute to you. It's still grateful for you.
Yeah.
And so when we start to put those pieces of the puzzle together and people go, holy crap, if I start playing with my body different, if I start asking it different questions, if I start to see it as a vehicle for creation, instead of this thing that I wake up to every day that I judge the crap out of, it can begin to open up the world to, and you and the body to what's actually possible.
Yeah.
Because the body, you plant the seed of like, what would it take to drive a white Ferrari? So I'll give a quick story. This is how it works. Is a couple weeks ago, I was like, oh man, I really want a white Tesla. And I could like feel it. I could feel myself in it. I could feel myself driving it. I was just like, oh. And then I had a meeting with somebody who is does a lot of like trading and market stuff, and he lost out on a several $1 million deal because he split second doubted his knowing. And so I asked him a couple questions about that moment because it was in the last couple weeks, so really recent. And I asked him a couple questions and I said, what was the moment that you doubted? And he said, I said to myself, I couldn't take that risk again. And I was like, that's the moment you killed the creation, because you only looked at one side of the coin. So I said, if you would have stopped and said, if you were willing to take the risk, what would it create for your future? He goes, oh my God, I would have bought. I would have done the investment. Yeah. And he would have turned around and made several $1 million in less than a week. Yeah. And he goes, oh my God, where were you a week ago? I would have bought. And he didn't know. that I had said a week ago, I want a white Tesla, he said, I would have bought you a white Tesla with white leather interior and diamond studs. And I was like, thank you, universe, for hearing my request. And
Yeah.
so it didn't show up as me getting a Tesla, but it showed up as, oh, it's coming.
Yeah, and the story's not over. I mean, that's the beautiful thing. Like, we don't have to make it about a time. Like, what if there was no beginning and end? And it's like, okay, it was heard. You acknowledge it. And he has this whole way of now being in the world so that when the next deal comes along, he's going to know when that little like comes up, he doesn't have to be hooked by it. And it's so brilliant. I mean, this whole thing of judgment, I mean, judgment without past reference can't actually exist. So every time we go into judgment, we're actually just measuring ourselves by something that occurred in the past, which has nothing to do with what is possible for the future. And yet when we keep living as though only that which has occurred is possible, then, I mean, how many creations do we kill with that? So it's a brilliant example. So, so what are some of the tools that you really like to use when people are starting out? This whole non-judgment piece. I mean, it's huge. And, you know, I consider it a practice every day. You know, sometimes it's like, yes, I'm doing great. And I'm like, oh, and now I just judge myself. So there you go. So, you know, there's all the judgment that we can acknowledge and that we're conscious of. And then there's all the super secret judgment that sort of gets intertwined into all the bits and pieces. But when we're starting, you said you start with people where they are. So what is a way that we can begin to get a sense of where we are? And then from that place, what can we start choosing to begin building that muscle for creating a future through possibilities instead of avoiding disaster by judging the past? I mean, we can do that. That can be fun too. But if we want to choose something else, what else is available?
Well, there's a couple things. And the first piece of it is when you're creating your life, when you're having the time of your life and you're working or you're playing or you're traveling or you're like making money in a way that you're like, yes, you don't even think to judge yourself. There is no room. It doesn't even enter the time frame because there's this like rumble of creation that is so attractive to the body, attractive to the being. And it's like, oh my God, I forgot to eat. I forgot to sleep. I forgot to, you know, put pants on, or like, you know, all that stuff. And so that's the first part is one, knowing that it's not about eliminating the judgment. It's about activating the creation.
Awesome. I love that.
And then the second piece to that is, okay, if you are drowning in a sea of judgment, it's a little hard to even see the window of creation. So how do we get you from the pool or the sea of judgment to the creation? And, you know, with the tools of access, the first piece is 98% of your judgments aren't yours. 98% of your problems aren't yours. And where I look at, Rebecca, and I'm sure you looked at this too, is like we go, oh, the future is unknown.
Yeah.
So let me make up a story that involves being worried about the future instead of let me receive an energy that involves being excited about the future.
Yeah. And how many of us have such capacities for perceiving futures? And, you know, if there truly are an infinite number of possibilities in any given moment, right? Like you have infinite choice. Like I could choose any number of an infinite number of choices. Like it's just a pot of choices that just keeps bubbling over. And so when we have these capacities to perceive all kinds of different possible futures, we can use that as a weapon against ourselves, you know, to look at all of the things where everything blows up and it's terrible and we die and, you know, everything is ruined for all eternity. And for every one of those, there's also another one that, you know, may actually be something that you'd really enjoy and that might really be fun, or that might really work, or that might create something greater that you're asking for. And so it's like, well, how do you want to use your superpowers? Do you want to use, your superpower? I mean, Superman, he can jump a building in a single bound, right? So like that's a capacity. But if he only ever jumped into a brick wall, like, okay, he can do that, but like, is that really going to create something greater for him? Or could he choose the other possibility? So that's that same piece of like, when we can perceive so much and we put it into this box of worry, right? And then we judge that. So then it gets even more solid and more solid and more solid. And like, gosh, how heavy is that? And what I hear you saying is just being able to perceive the different possibilities and just having like almost a softness to it, to just being able to choose something without having to judge it based on past experiences. And opening yourself up to, maybe something that's never occurred, even if you don't have any proof that it could work out that way.
Well, and there's like a couple really practical things. And, sometimes when we live them or we're being it, we forget that the rest of the world might not know. So, a couple really practical things is to get really clear on the future you'd like to have. Yeah. So, is it a family? Is it living in a home? Is it traveling the world? Is it, running a company? Is it having time freedom or financial freedom? Like getting a sense of, wow, what are some of those energies I'd actually like to have? Because the truth is, as a humanoid, everything's light. Yeah. We're experimenters of magnitude. So we're like, sure,
I want it all.
Sure, I'll try that. So it really is about getting this idea and this sense of, what do you value? What's important to you? What's fun for you? What lights up your body? And getting like those things. And then once you get clear on that, then all those choices that we have available, every seed that we plant every day, it then goes, okay, I just planted 1 million seeds today. Which ones want to be activated? Which ones want to be cultivated? Which ones just want saying hi to? Which ones want to be tucked away for future? And then once you start planting those seeds, it's okay, who do you need to be today to actualize them right away?
Yeah, I love that question.
Instead of, oh, I planted my seed, let me just like sit back and wait. Yeah. That's the piece is, and here's like, and we know this cognitively, but when you get it in the body, it's different, is that 99% of actualization is being, not doing. Yeah. Because when you're being and you follow your gut instinct, the creation and institution aspects are so easy, it doesn't feel like a doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And how much busyness actually gets eliminated because you have the clarity of what's required. So you actually can just take that action as opposed to doing a whole bunch of things, hoping that maybe you'll scattershot the right thing, whatever, because you're not really willing to look at, what is required. So you're like, I don't really know. So I'm just going to throw a bunch of stuff and hope something hits, right? That thing of like, well, and what if we could just actually play from the space of awareness and actually check in with ourselves instead of, almost like trying to hide our knowing from ourselves so that we can't get it wrong. How brilliant is that?
And I look at like, okay, so like just a practical tool is I encourage people once a month. And I do this probably, I might not do it every month because I'll sit down and I'll write a list for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is everything I want to actualize? Yeah. And I'm not kidding. I'll go back and read the ones from like 5 years ago, 3 years ago, even Crazy. 2 years ago. And I'm like, I created that. So if you're somebody who's like, but I don't know, but I don't trust myself. Yeah. Take out a pen and a paper and literally write a list of everything you want to actualize because it does show up. And then you look at your list every day and you go, which wants my attention? Yeah. What action do I need to take today to actualize right away? And you would be so, I mean, this, and it really, does work, and what stops it or slows it down is judgment.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, so I don't know, 12 years ago, maybe I created it's a creation box. So it was just a shoe box that I decorated. And this was before I had kids. And so I would literally, when things showed up where I was like that, and sometimes it would be like a rug. And it wasn't that I wanted that rug, but just when I looked at it, there was something about it where I was like, oh, yeah, I love that. And so it was like, oh, I love that. And I'll put that in here, and just saying like, hey, universe, this is kind of my mailbox. Like, I'm putting this stuff in, and, you know, if you could just acknowledge this and like send stuff my way if you can, and that would be great. And so we'll have this conversation energetically this way. And I'll just put my little requests in my little universal request box. And, I found this box, well, it must have been over the holidays when my mom was here. And I pulled out these two pictures of a little girl and a little boy. I brought them to my mom and I said, guess when I put these in my creation box? And she, you know, no idea. I said, yeah, before Miley was born, before I was pregnant with Miley. And these two children look incredibly like my children. I mean, like incredibly. And it was that thing of, you know, I didn't go and look in the box every day and say like, are you coming? Are you coming? Are you coming? Oh, like, what about that? Will it be like this? What if I can't find that outfit to dress my kid that way? Or, you know, like none of that. It was just like, and then I asked and I put it in there and I was like, okay, thank you. And then I kept going. And yeah, these things just show up, and you gotta kind of like have that moment and then like let it go. Like that whole,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I mean, surrender isn't quite the word I'm looking for, but there is this like relaxing into the space of the energy that is the from whatever it is for you.
Yeah.
So awesome. So once a month, inviting people to sit down and really play with, well, what is it that I'm asking for? Now, so they can recognize it. Yes. Or what would you say to that? It's the
Just to
request,
do
and
it.
yeah.
Just to do it, to see what it creates and put it away, and, you know, visit it a year later.
Yeah.
See what, yeah, it's to start. And you said something just now. It's like one of the biggest things in the actualization process is, if you trusted you
Mm-hmm.
beyond a shadow of a doubt, right? Like the tagline of Access is empowering people to know that they know. If you trusted you beyond a shadow of a doubt, then you know that when you ask for something, it will show up.
Yeah.
It might be 10 years from now, it might be tomorrow.
Yeah.
But we're constantly using time as a way to invalidate what we know.
Yeah.
Or doubt that, oh, but it's not going to show up. It's like, no, you asked for it. You're one of the most magical people on the planet. It's just not going to show up how you want it and when you want it. But if you
Yeah.
trust you, and when you know that, it just creates a different possibility.
Yeah.
And it's the asks that are like, oh my God, if anyone even knew I was asking for that, they would go, you're crazy. Right? Those are the ones where I'm like, okay, I'm going to write that on Facebook. I'm going to say this out loud. Right? Because for me, at least, then I'm like, I can't take it back.
Yeah.
Nor do I want to. But when we keep it a secret, sometimes it's like, hee. Versus
Yeah.
like, wow, if I were willing, and I mean, everybody has to do what works for them.
Yeah.
It's like finding ways to go, well, this is what I know is possible.
Yeah.
Might
And
happen in my lifetime, might not.
yeah. And it's also that thing, like I totally get it, where I mean, how many judgments are required to hide something, right? And or to keep a secret. And so it's that thing too of like, you know, it's out there, right? It's full transparency. There are no little weird energies of like, just kidding, or not really, or it's just saying, yeah, okay, here. Huh.
Mm-hmm.
Just there's space with that. So, oh shoot, I had something I wanted to say. It was a question. Oh, it was so amazing, I'm sure. Huh. Okay. Well, it'll come back if it's important. Sometimes that happens. The train leaves the station a little early. Oh, that's what I was going to ask. So, what like for right now, what is like your biggest ask?
Mm.
Like, what
Mm.
is the craziest ask that you're asking?
Right now for me is 10 million bodies out of judgment.
Awesome.
Like with the no judgment diet, 10 million bodies out of judgment.
Hmm.
And I look at like, wow, that's 10 million bodies in creation.
Yeah.
That's 10 million bodies in like, ooh, what can we do today? Like,
Yeah.
I look at like, wow, if I was on a private jet or if I was on a commercial aircraft and
Yeah.
there's 200 seats and every single person on that seat didn't have a judgment. If I'm in an airport in Frankfurt and there's no judgment in Germany, like all those are where my brain goes to, because look at what it would create for the future of the children
Yeah.
that are being raised now, for the future of
Yeah.
the
The
planet,
planet.
and
Yeah.
and really for the future of our bodies, because I wonder what would happen to the aging process if
Yeah.
there were 10 million bodies out of judgment.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I know what it would do to my face would be different. I could
You're
just
so
start right
cute.
there.
Right? You're so cute. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, well, yeah. I love, so we've mentioned Gary Douglas. So one of the things that, for those of you who are not familiar with Access Consciousness is, it's an energy transformation modality that uses a bunch of very practical tools to really close this gap that we're talking about between completely being you and knowing that you know for you, and the other side of just being in constant judgment of yourself. And so the founder, Gary Douglas, and he said one of the calls, and he's like, yeah, my kids always said that my forehead, the wrinkles are like a ladder. And he said, yes, well, you're responsible for every rung. So yeah, how does it get any better? I don't know what you call this. I don't think it's a ladder, but something.
It's a
It's all good.
bridge.
It's
It's
a
a
bridge.
bridge.
Yes, yes, that's right. So, I yeah. So so you're asking for 10 million people that are walking, talking space and possibility is what I hear you
Hmm.
saying. So
Hmm.
where are we, do you think? Like
Oh my gosh.
what's your knowing? Like where are we in this?
Well, we're just beginning. And, Gary, I think like back in, I don't know, I think it was last year sometime where we had reached 10,000
Yeah.
people in consciousness, right? And 10,000 people in consciousness includes everything, judges nothing, right? So it's a similar, I wouldn't say target, but I think we're just beginning. I mean, when I first looked at the number, I was like, oh, 10,000 is comfortable. I'll say 10,000. And
Yeah.
I say 10 million, and that number's truthfully bigger now.
Yeah.
It's just I've kept with the number because it's a target that people can hear. I would
Yeah.
like it to be much. Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
perceiving it like, the old McDonald's signs that would say like how many served. So I'm like trying to perceive the number, and it's
Yeah.
like on this rolling ticker.
Well,
Maybe
because
infinite possibilities.
what's possible is changing, and it's not about being judgment free. Judgment's on the planet. You're a psychic intuitive being, you're going to pick up everybody else's judgments. It's recognizing that those judgments aren't real,
Yeah.
recognizing they're an illusion, and going, oh,
Yeah.
I don't need to spend 5 minutes entertaining something that isn't mine.
Yeah. Yeah. And then trying to fix it. We wonder sometimes why we can't fix things in our lives. And it's like, oh, because it's actually not even ours to fix. Not, and what if we didn't have to fix anything? But it makes me think of like, this, it's like this sort of really practical way of being sort of a walking, talking meditation where, in a meditation practice, it's not that thoughts won't come in. You're not trying to obliterate all thoughts. You'd be in a coma, but, it's just a matter of like, okay, so when they show up, what do you choose? Are you
Mm-hmm.
going to go with them? Are you going to get hooked by them? Are you going to go into whatever, bubbling and churning they're inviting? or are you actually going to be conscious about what's going on, what is, and then what you choose from there, and just, let it go. So it's that same thing of being like, oh, okay, cool. I just, I judge the bejesus out of that. And like, okay, so what am I being there? Is that actually in alignment with the energies that I'm asking for, the energies that I know that are possible? And then just being able to say, oh, okay, yeah, let me choose something different and let it go.
And that's the brilliance of creation. When you're clear on the future you want to have, it doesn't have to be specific. It doesn't have to look like a white Ferrari. It's just like, wow, I want ease in my body. I want joy on the planet. I want, like, you start to get clear on those elements of your future. Then when you are in your everyday living and something comes into your universe, wow, does that contribute? Is that going to get me to where I want to go? And if the answer is no, you drop it.
Yeah.
Right? You walk away and you just go, wow, that's not relevant. It's not mine. It's not significant. And, one of the things I said, it's some quote somewhere that's been kind of around for, I don't know, 6 months or something, is your judgments of you are not relevant to the creation of your future.
Yes.
And other people's judgments of you are not relevant to the creation of your future. And so, creation actualized, or, actualizing creation, is this idea that, wow, the thing that feels the most fun or the most expansive is to play in the energy of future, or to play in the energy of now and see what we can actualize. Is a way more than going, oh my God, I have this judgment about, my face or what, like, it just takes away from the fun.
Yeah. And how much energy, how much energy does it take to stay in that solid place where you're just sort of looping in your own little private hell? And as opposed to, I see it in my life all the time. If there's something that is not working, or that is kind of, if I try to be like steadfast of like, I'm going to change this, and I'm not going to leave until I fix this. Right. And then sometimes the whole day can go and it's like, and it just gets worse and worse. Whereas if I'm like, okay, so this is clearly not working. And if I would actually allow myself to ask a question, okay, well, what else? Like, what else? I could go for a walk. I could go drive somewhere. I could work on a different project. I could go sit in the sun, like whatever, what's it going to be? Sometimes even just by choosing something different for 5 minutes, I can go back to that project, and all of a sudden there's a whole new space where now it's that ease, like you were talking about before, about, the institution and the action pieces. Like if there's this thing where it's not working, we can take a break. We can actually shift and change the energy that we're being, and then see, okay, which flower is asking to be watered now? Maybe it's not the one that you woke up thinking it has to be this one today. Maybe it's a different one. And then you have that ease, and you start to have this sort of perpetual motion machine that's engaged, right? As opposed to always having to like muscle your way to, get up the hill and then stop. And then, instead it's like there's this grace and there's this flow. And sometimes it's a little faster, sometimes it's a little slower, but you can move with it without all the resistance.
Yeah. I mean, you said something, it's like, if it's not working, it's not yours.
Yeah,
and if it's
cool.
not yours, stop, drop, and roll, like leave it at the door. It is not relevant. And it really is. And it sounds like we're making it sound really easy. I know we both have gone through a lot of like, just really the challenges of how do we create a future with raising children, with having a family in a way that's easeful.
Yeah.
And, if it's not working, it's not yours. If it's not easeful, it's actually not.
Yeah.
You can certainly force it. You can certainly try it. But like, if it's not an instantaneous fruition, maybe it's just a much bigger ask.
Yeah. Yeah. Or, are you actually asking something for someone else? I mean, that whole, we're saying, it might not be yours, but just, really acknowledging, like, would you be willing to have the courage to actually create the life and the living that works for you? Like, that's not just a thing that I say at the beginning of the show. It's something that I play with every single day of like, okay, the life that I'm creating, and then the living that is the motion of moment to moment within whatever that life looks like. And does it work? And when it doesn't work, like you said, lots of times it's not mine. It's something that I've kind of bought into, is like, well, because I've chosen this, now I have to choose this. And when I'm willing to have the courage to say, it's okay, like, I am willing to be different. Like, I'm willing to be a little weird. I'm willing to, I don't need to try to like say, look how weird, I'm so different, and at the same time, if what I'm choosing doesn't match what other people are choosing, like, would I be willing to say that's okay and to not even have judgment about that, even when I'm doing it wrong?
Yeah, well, and it's like if we didn't judge ourselves, or if we trusted unanimously how much we're capable of,
Yeah.
like how quickly would you be able to actualize what you're asking for?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And how like not only how quickly, how much more would you be willing to start asking for
Yes.
if you knew it was instantaneous?
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I mean,
Well,
it's all there.
yeah, and it really is this element of, creation for everyone. The beginning of it is just to dream, to
Yeah.
plant the seeds, to see the elements and energies that are like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then the play and the adventure of it is to start to see what it takes to call those energies in. And like
Yeah.
you said in the beginning, just because you're asking for, a specific car like a Ferrari or a Porsche doesn't mean that has to show up, but it could be a beautiful dress.
Yeah.
It could be, a conversation with somebody having tea, and you're like, that just opened up my whole world.
Yeah.
These elements will literally actualize in ways that surprise us when
Yeah.
we're willing to go, wow, every moment is a gift. And if it is crunchy, like, don't judge the crunchy. Indulge in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Indulge in it, because it too will pass.
Well,
It
and
too will change.
yeah, everything, everything. It's like that whole piece of, non-attachment too, right? Or interesting point of view of like, right? There's really like, whether it's great or it's not great or whatever, like, it is all constantly changing. So whatever it is, we just,
Mm.
we keep moving. We keep choosing forward. We keep going. And, so that was working. Okay, great. You can choose more of it. Or you could even ask, okay, so, well, that was great. And what else? Like, if I would choose even beyond that to something I can't even imagine, that's dialing that energy up even another however many notches, like, what would that be like? And
Mm.
opening up to receiving that. Um, so where would you say, because I know sometimes there is that thing of getting stuck, or people have this perception of getting stuck between being and doing. And you were talking before about how actualizing, a large percentage of it is really a being of what you're being, the energy you're being, what you're being. Those are the words I can use. Um, and then there is, oftentimes there is an action piece, um, but the action is really just sort of a physical expression of the being, as opposed to a doing, which oftentimes is kind of the judgment hammering itself into
Mm.
your reality. So, when people are like, well, I'm trying to actualize it, and there's this kind of energy of doing, where do you go? Where do you go there to help create a different possibility to bridge that gap between the doing and the actualizing?
Yeah. my sitter just came, so we're moving locations.
Cool.
Um, yeah, so it's a great question. It's like the 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 piece from creation to actualization, when it's not working, it's like it really, I think you named it. It's really like I love the analogy of dating or sex or relationships because people tend to get it. So if like I was asking you out and you're like, yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
like, come on, Rebecca. You're real like so we do this with our creations and with actualization is we tend to like get so in its face and then it's like it goes farther and farther and farther away because the last thing like creation desires is to be cajoled or convinced. It
Yeah.
really is a natural state of a like explosion of combustible possibilities
So
that
you don't want to
come
be the
in.
used car salesman trying to convince the universe that you deserve all this stuff.
When I'm in a crunchy place and I'm trying to create and it's just not working, well, I have to change the, and it's just not working. It really is. I go for a hike or I go for a mountain bike ride or I go to yoga or I literally will turn my computer off for 24 hours and walk away.
Yeah.
And really like one of the greatest gifts is to get out in nature.
Yeah.
Nature is there is no judgment in nature. You know, there is no judgment with the trees and the ocean and rivers and the earth. And so when you get out in nature in that way, it it can and you can go, okay, like universe help me out here because
Yeah.
whatever I'm doing is not working. What do I need to choose different? What do I need to be different? Who do I need to be different? And go from there.
Yeah. Yeah, and not who do I need to be different because I've seen where people have used that of like who do I need to be and then they go into a comparison and it's not who out there do I need to be. It's who that I know I truly am can I actually choose to
Mm,
be today
mm.
that that will create what I'm asking to create.
Yeah, it's and it's like this. Sorry, I'm it's like this how do I say it? So one of the questions I started asking maybe like a couple months ago was who am I becoming?
Yeah.
Right? So if, you know, it's a little bit of a different spin on what would it take or who do I need to be? It's who am
Yeah.
I becoming? So if I'm becoming a best-selling author, if I'm becoming a, global facilitator, if I'm becoming the
Yeah.
best mom on the planet,
Yeah.
then I'm already functioning as if I'm being that. The choices are different.
Yeah.
So you don't even look at lack.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
you're already being who you want to be, lack is a lie.
Yeah.
And I think that's the piece that we forget is a lot of people are trying to actualize from the place that they have lack now. And
Yes.
when you start to go, well, look around my life. I have a roof, I have a home, I have kids, I have a car, I can travel, I've got money in the bank, or maybe you don't and you have food in your fridge. Like it doesn't everything doesn't have to always be like
Yeah.
perfect. It's
Yeah.
okay, well, what do I have now? And can I see that not as lack, but as possibility?
Yeah, and you brought nature into this conversation, and one of the things that that I invite everyone to play with as well, like if you're feeling like, if you're buying the lie that you are in lack or that there isn't enough or you're in
Mm,
that place and there's nothing, like maybe you owe bills, maybe you don't have food in the fridge, maybe your kids have holes in their shoes, like whatever it is, and it's like, I can't even fathom abundance right now. Like it just, that's not even in my world. Go outside. Nature is the full expression of abundance. I mean, there's always something. And even if you're in the desert, right? I mean, look at the sand, right? There's always an abundance there. And
mm,
there's, and,
mm,
and, and if you can even just go out and make it not about you and your little world, and you can tap into the abundance that's actually all around you and all the expressions of that. I mean, look at how many, just one tree, how many leaves are on it? Just one, right? Find an anthill. Oh my gosh, abundance, right? So, you know, if you can't find it where you're looking, where else can you look to be able to see it, to perceive it, to know it's possible? And then would you be willing to allow yourself to receive that as a possibility for yourself too? Yeah, cool. So I see that we are getting, this is going to, I know there's no time, and yet Facebook is telling me that there is time, and it looks like we're almost to the top of the hour. And your assistant, hello. I love it.
There's my monkey. There's my reason for everything I do. And, you know, like just an example of how this works is, you know, gosh, I was 28. I was studying in a coffee shop with a girlfriend. I was a hairdresser. I was studying to get my real estate license. I was bartending, and I was doing energy work on the side. And she asked me some question. I said, well, the only way I'll ever have a kid is if he's on my, and I said he or she, I don't remember. It wasn't a sex. It was like, if they're on my back traveling the world with me. Right. And then I forgot that I had demanded that and said that. And I saw her a year after he was born, and she met him for the first time. And she said, do you remember what you said? And I was like, no. She's like, you demanded to be a world traveling mama with a kid on your back, whatever it took, you know? And so like for anyone listening, I think it really is just to encourage them. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to just dream freaking big and put it out there.
Yeah.
The worst thing that can happen is that it doesn't, but put it out there because something else will.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Shoot for the moon and you'll get the stars, something like that. That's awesome. Yeah. And, you know, and there's no formula. I mean, that's what's so beautiful. You know, I mean, how and what you choose and when you choose it and where you choose it, and like there are so many different masterpieces to be created, and you know, what's yours? And what if it gets to be a new one, moment to moment to moment to moment? How fun could that be? So does anybody who's watching now, does anybody have any, and everybody that's been popping on, I've been seeing your comments, and thank you. It's so great to have you here. Does anybody have any specific questions for Katherine before we wrap up? Is there anything, any last minute pieces? And I'll give you guys a minute, not I'll give you, but you have a moment to be able to type those in. And while they're looking at that, Katherine, is there anything else just in terms of this conversation of actualizing in your life? Is there any piece that we have not gotten to that you would like to share those who are watching with?
Yeah, actually, one of the things that I look at is if you have a list of all your creations, of all your seeds. One of the questions I ask people that surprise them, and I ask myself, and it surprises me. All right, hold on.
Mom, I want to hear.
Yeah, we can't hear it right now, but in a second. So one of the things is I ask them to go, well, truth, is it already actualized? Your $1 million or your travel around the world, is it already actualized? And it surprises the crap out of people because they go, oh my gosh, yes. And I'm like, cool, where is it? Is it on another planet? Is it in your past? Is it in the future 50 years? And so when they go, oh my God, it's already actualized, it opens up the door for those things to come in even quicker. So then you go, okay, what's it going to take to bring it in to fruition now?
Yeah.
And so what we don't realize is the minute we ask for something, it begins to actualize.
Yeah.
And then it's a matter of, well, what if I already got my Tesla? So it's time to ask for something different.
Yeah, and then
Like,
that actually gives the space where you're not holding on to it, that there's actually the space for it to show up.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and what I hear you also kind of pointing at is just this acknowledgement piece. I mean, acknowledging one, that we've asked, acknowledging two, that the universe is actually listening, acknowledging what has already shown up, and acknowledging that there's so much more that you
Mm,
might not even be aware of yet.
mm,
And acknowledging that you can trust in the actualization without actually having uh, um, a rational reason for it or any sort of proof. You can just actually know that that it's there.
yeah. And when you know and you don't doubt, it can show up quicker. It can
Yeah,
show up with more ease. You don't have to fight.
yeah,
You don't have to struggle. We don't have to make a roadblock in the
yeah,
way to make it harder for things to show up. So, yeah.
yeah. Well, and when we doubt, how much are we actually protecting ourselves, right? It's like we're actually protecting ourselves from the possibility of it not working out. So then it's easier to be right that it wasn't going to happen and feed into the doubt than, than to actually, than to actually allow it to come through and be like, oh my gosh, look at, I'm actually so potent. There's so much possible here.
Yeah, and it's funny because I would go, wow, it's not even protecting ourselves, it's that we're limiting. Like the
Yeah.
idea that we're protecting ourselves is the lie
Yeah.
to not create what we're
Exactly.
capable of creating.
Yeah, because if there is no judgment and you could never fail, what would you ever have to protect yourself from? Yes, so Anastasia, she's asking, how do you get out of heaviness when you're asking, but you feel you're pressured to create it in a certain amount of time?
Mm,
Yeah.
that's a great question. And the first question I would ask is the pressure yours? Right. And I get, like, I've been to the place where I didn't know how I was going to pay the mortgage. I've been to the place with a son going, we might get kicked out of our house and lose.
Uh-oh, let's see. All right, looks like I'm still live, and it looks like maybe Catherine is not. Oh, okay, good. So she's going to come back on. I'll just wait for her. Great question, Anastasia. We'll get back to it in a minute. Let's see. So if anybody else has any questions, please put them in now, because then we will be wrapping up. Yay! And thank you to everybody, truly, all of you who are here. All right. And I get it. I mean, there's this whole thing of, we're saying, if there was no time, or we were not the effect of time. And yet, if you have a deadline at a job, or you have a boss that is very time conscious, or, has made time very real, how can we be the space while still maneuvering through time? And so I just would wonder, like, what energy can you choose for you in those moments when you are feeling that heaviness, right? So when something is heavy, oftentimes that is an indicator that that there's a lie there, or that it's not yours. So, just really kind of checking in with, okay, so what am I making more real than what I know? Or what am I making more real than me? Or what am I not willing to look at here? What can I look at here that could actually change and shift this heaviness right now and give me more ease with whatever this, thing is that you're addressing that has a time sensitivity. So let's see. I still don't see her on here. Oh, there she is. Yay. There we go. Okay. All right, good. But she will finish addressing. Hey, okay, good.
My phone died.
No worries, no worries. So I just blabbered a little bit in the middle, and it looks like people are still watching, so haven't lost them yet. So you were just answering, or you were just responding to Anastasia about the heaviness and about, well, what if, the first question is, if it's heavy, is it even yours? And about the pressure. And then, okay, so what energy can I choose for me when I'm feeling that heaviness? What am I making more real than me? What am I not looking at? And those are some of the questions that we were playing with while you were plugging your phone in.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the biggest thing is because the angle of this is looking at what you're not choosing versus what you could be choosing.
Yeah.
Right. So when I'm feeling that heaviness, there's heaviness all around. So the first question, of course, is to ask, is it yours? But then it's like, wait a second, like, where are you making heaviness? And is as if you had to get rid of the heaviness first in order to create. So when she's asking, what am I?
Uh-oh. Oh, there we go.
Okay. Are you making, are you making lack more real than you? Are you making not enough more real than you? Are you making that things are in your way and roadblocks are real more real than you?
Yeah.
Right? And would you be willing to make creation and the fact that you're a potent creator the most important energy, the most important?
Yeah. Or like if you're crossing a stream and you're halfway in the middle and then you just stop and you say, it's cold and it's wet and it's cold and it's wet. Okay, but like instead of like standing there trying to figure out, and like reconcile the cold and wet, just take another couple steps and get out of the stream. Just keep going. Cool. Awesome. Thanks for asking, Anastasia. So that brings us to the top of the hour. So you can find, I will be posting this to YouTube, and then I will put that link here onto the Facebook page. And in that, when you go and watch it on YouTube, you'll see in the show notes all the links to find Katherine. And also I'll be including in there, in case you missed it over the course of the week, we had some links that were posted to some sound clips that Katherine has graciously offered, and a whole slew of opt-ins. I know, Katherine, you have a ton of freebies, a ton of video resources for people, just so many free gifts that are available to anybody who would like more. So all of those links will be available in the show notes. You're welcome. And is there anything specific that you would like to invite people to, Katherine, as we're closing?
Everything.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I'm most excited about right now that I'm actually in the middle of, we just finished class number 2 out of a 10-week series called the No Business Plan. And it really is, how do you actualize a business without a plan? Because as humanoids, we tend to contract when we think we need a plan. And then if we don't have a plan, we tend to judge that we don't have a plan, so we can't create without a plan. So it's this 10-week series on practical tools that Gary has given almost all of us over the years, practical tools of how I went from, less than $1,000 in my bank account to a multiple 6-figure business, traveling the world. And I chose those things before I had the money. It wasn't I waited for the money and then I chose those things. Choosing those things created the money. So it's kind of practical tools on a huge leap of faith and trusting in your creative capacities. So that is something, if you guys like this conversation, we'd invite you to the party
Yeah.
Next week's the last week to join. It's a 10-week series, but after week 3, we kind of close down the gates.
Yes.
And that people can go to KatherineMcIntosh.com/no business plan, all one word. And it's convo plan, whereas there we go. Look at Sevi. I love you, Sevi. Sevi's actually has been in there as a French translator. She's been such a contribution. It is translated in French, which is so cool. So yeah, so that's what I would say.
That's awesome. And, Katherine, what I love so much about this is that, you really are, it's this thing of like, don't come and like learn what I know. You're really saying like, come on, let's play and let's get you to know what your juju is. Like, come and see what your superpowers are. Come and see what it is that's been there all along that maybe you just haven't acknowledged yet. And what if you now had tools to, bring it out more into the world. So, how awesome. And so everybody watching, will you be contributing to the 10 million in no judgment and consciousness? And whatever other fun we can conjure. So thank you for that, Katherine. And it really, as always, is a pleasure to play with you. So all the links will be in the show notes. I wonder what all you can choose with no judgment and the no judgment diet. How fun is that? So thank you guys. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. If you do enjoy the show, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and like us here on the Art of Creation Show Facebook page. I wonder what you will choose over the next week. I wonder what you will create. I wonder what you will actualize. And then I wonder what we'll discover next. Thank you guys for playing. See you next week.